Hello, everyone. Welcome back again. If you're still sticking around with me, got a couple of people that seem to be watching, and if you are, I hope that you're enjoying. So far, I've been enjoying this whole process, trying to figure out what in the world I wrote back in the day. But we are at chapter 7 right now. Sorry, I forgot the name of the title and I looked away. Chapter 7 Desperate Measures. Now that my phone's on silent, it'll be a little easier to focus. But in the previous chapter, we had the dynamic duo, since we're talking about the tremendous trio, but we had Michael and Jacob French, the FBI agent, trying to make their way through the facility and track down where the other two were. And they were able to run into them and discover that they were both turned into animals, but they were able to administer antidotes to both of them and get them back. Then, after some discussion, they decided to split up and try to both escape from the facility and destroy the work that the scientists, the rogue scientists, have been doing here. So we're going to read a little bit through chapter 7, and then once again I'll give my commentary and thoughts on this. This is definitely one of those things that is a practice run for things that are going to be a little bit more serious in the future. I probably will continue this into the next book, though based off of the very brief look I've taken at that, that book is not complete despite being significantly longer than this one. So it'll be interesting to see where I got and whether I can at all remember where I was going with anything. Because so far through 6 chapters of Trial by Fire, I'm still pretty uncertain about what exactly is going to happen here. I have some idea because of the names of the chapters upcoming here and some of the things that we've seen, once again, just being able to look at the different tendencies I have as a writer and kind of read the tea leaves and realize where things are probably going. That said, if you've been following along, you probably noticed a couple of things that I commented on that I thought were going one direction that ended up going the other. The one that stands out to me is my original thought that it was going to be that the tremendous trio gets turned into animals via injection, and then the scientist commented on the formula now being able to be deployed in a gas form. And funnily enough, we come right back around to injection being how Richard was changed originally. So pretty funny. I think it's interesting how I've kind of swerved myself that way, that I thought I was going one direction, then a comment in the plot made me think something else, and then it just ended up being my original thought. So things like that could still happen. We'll see. For now, we're going to read Chapter 7, Desperate Measures, and find out whether the tremendous trio, +1, can make it out of the facility. All right, Jake, think you can make it without a map? Michael said, breaking the silence after a few moments of trekking through the halls. We reached the crossroads. Here's where we part paths. Yeah, I can make it from here. The exit isn't too far away, Jake responded. When should I use the signal? He continued, taking the strange device from Michael. Find a good spot and use it. We're close enough to the main lab now that it shouldn't make much difference when you use it. Good luck. The two parties now separated, Jake going down the hall to his right while the others turned left. Richard took the lead and kept his pistol at the ready. Then the signal came. All available units, report to Sector 14, report to Sector 14. Escaped prisoner sighted. Requesting additional forces in Sector 14, the call came across the radios. That's our cue, said Michael. Hurry, let's get to the main lab, ASAP. They took off, leaving all thought of stealth behind. Stealth? Well, I don't know if you heard that, but that was more of an F than a TH. Once again, let's try from the beginning. Oh, wow, I missed that. They took off, leaving all thought of stealth behind, depending solely on their disguises to keep attention from them. For some reason, though, they didn't come across any patrols. When they reached the main lab, they found out why. All the guards were still tightly covering the lab area. The three fell back behind a wall. What now? Asked Richard. None of these guys even responded to the call. Do you think something went wrong? I hope not, Michael said quietly. Let's see if we can get to Sector 14 and give the other guys a hand. Other guys, I'm guessing we're talking about the guards. It's a little odd in the way I worded that. They set back off, looking for trouble this time. They soon returned to the junction that they had left Jake at. That's a odd wording. And continued down the hall that he had followed. What do you think we'll do if we find him? Asked Jessica. Hope and pray that he'll be all right and that they will take him to the main lab. If they do, we'll mingle with the crowd and try to get into the facility that way. They continued on, using the map to figure out where they should turn next. I don't know why that's not capitalized. You'd think that would be caught by autocorrect. Finally, they heard yelling from around a corner. They slowed as they turned a corner. Lots of corners. onto the scene. There a good number of guards had already accumulated. Richard, to the surprise of the others, walked right up behind one of the guards. "What's going on? Where's the escaped prisoner?" he demanded. "He's in that room over there," the guard said, pointing. "He has a lot of weapons and ammunition. I think he's the one that sacked the armory earlier." "How are we going to get him out of there?" Richard inquired further. "Just wait. We already have guys taking care of it." Just then, a group of guards burst through the door. There was a burst of gunfire, then a brief struggle, then everything quieted down. The guards emerged a few moments later with Jake held between two of them. His left leg bore a bullet wound, but he looked otherwise unharmed. "All right, let's go. I'm sure that the scientists have a few interesting ideas for him," said the guard with which Richard had been talking. The three waited as the procession passed, then joined, walking at the back of the formation. Several guards broke off at another junction, but the three kept following the others as they neared the main lab. "Just hope that no one asks any questions," mumbled Michael. He fingered the control for the explosives. "I just need a little time." "I need just a little time?" Yeah. Once again, I think I commented this on something else that Michael said, but this is something I'll probably put into thoughts because this is not something that Michael needs to communicate with his friends at this point. They rounded the final corner and walked to the door that led to the main laboratory. The man in front whispered something to the guard to the left of the door, and with a quick nod, the man opened the door. The other lab had been big. This one was gigantic. Punctuation question. The ceiling couldn't have been lower than 20 feet high. That's a weird phrase. I'm stopping to commentate a little bit much on this one. Let me get back into the rhythm. Scientists walked quickly back and forth, some working with computers, some observing reactions in test tubes, others doing whatever needed to be done. The operation moved like a well-oiled machine. No one was idle. The guards were even involved, some with computers, others guarding various animals as they were tested. Richard stiffened slightly as he saw a jaguar surrounded by scientists in one of the testing areas, but Jessica grabbed his arm and whispered to him. He nodded, but his eyes hardened. Michael noticed his grip tightening on his pistol. He moved quickly over. "Not now, Richard," he whispered. "Any false move could put us in danger, as well as everyone else in this room, even the prisoners." He nodded, but his hand stayed on the gun. They followed the other guards as they led Jake to one of the scientists. As he turned, Michael recognized him. Dr. Manchester gave a crooked smile as a captive was brought to him. "Well, well, Agent French, what a surprise. I thought that putting you in isolation would help, but you surprised me yet again. When I heard that you had gotten out, I mobilized every unit in the sector to find you. No wonder they didn't catch you. The outfit fits quite well." "Well, Doctor, desperate times and all that. I wasn't about to let you get away with any of this after seeing your serums work," Jake responded. "Ah, yes, they're quite impressive, are they not?" "They're cruel and unnecessary, Doctor. This entire project is inhumane. We both know that. Just shut this thing down." Breaking in again to note that I believe Richard also used inhumane in his description. "I'm afraid I can't do that. There is so much opportunity out there for us. All we have to do is reach out and take it," Manchester said, walking back to a huge computer. He squinted at it for a few moments. As he turned, a guard broke from the group and walked towards the central computer. "I'm afraid that you failed, French. Your valiant efforts have proved to be of little use." "I'll get back out," said French with a defiant tone. "No, you won't. In fact, it will make little difference if you do, after we've changed you." The doctor chuckled. "I'm a fair man, though. I'll give you your choice of animal. We have 17 to choose from. Don't worry. I believe you'll look great in fur." "These atrocities will not go unpunished," Jake yelled. The doctor laughed. "They already have, Jacob, and there's nothing anyone can do to stop us. Even if this installation went under, we have several others." Jake's eyes widened. "Manchester, you crazy fool! Nothing good can come of all this. Your actions only cause pain. Money can't mend what you're doing to these people." Manchester laughed again, a long, cruel laugh. "Their pain is not my concern. I am now a rich man because of my discoveries." "How long can your money last?" Jacob asked. You're already advanced in years. If all goes well, you probably don't have any more than 15 years left in you." The scientist got right up in the prisoner's face. "I intend to make these years of my life the best I've ever had." I think that might be a double space there. "At what cost?" countered Jake. "Nothing for me," the old man said coldly. He motioned to another doctor who had just been working with the synthesizer. The man handed a syringe to Manchester, unaware of the return of the other guard. Manchester took Jacob's arm while the two others held him. Suddenly, one of the ones who had held Jacob fell forward with a startled cry. Jacob, realizing what was happening, smashed the other guard with his free fist, causing him to lose his grip on Jake's arm. Jake rolled out of the way as a guard shot at him, causing the shot to miss the mark. Another shot rang out, and the guard fell, dropping his gun. Caught completely off guard, Manchester stood staring at the chaos. It was impossible to tell who was fighting who. Technically whom, but, I'll give it a pass. A ring of guards had formed, but no one dared to take the chance of hitting the wrong person. Finally, in the confusion of sounds, a clear voice rang out. Now! With a tremendous roar, the computer in the center of the room exploded. The guards turned to watch in amazement. Taking the opportunity, two of the guards ran from amid the chaos. The third jumped at Manchester and clapped his hand over the man's mouth. Jake picked up a discarded weapon and began firing at the stunned ring of guards. Manchester struggled, trying to break free from the man's grasp. Suddenly seeing his chance, he stabbed the guard's hand with a syringe and emptied its contents into his victim. The man gave a cry and let go, instead grasping his own arm. Manchester left the man and stood in confusion, looking at the chaotic scene. His mind was suddenly filled with unreasonable fear. His guards were attacking each other, and several test subjects who had yet to be fitted with a suppression collar were adding to the massive confusion. Only one option remained in his mind. He ran to a computer and began typing furiously. Suddenly, a loud metallic voice echoed through the room. 5 minutes to self-destruct. Self-destruct in 5 minutes. Immediately, the fighting stalled. Then the guards started running for the exits, except the three imposters. The frantic scientist pulled a pistol from his coat and aimed it at one of them. A shot rang out, and Manchester slipped silently to the ground. Agent French lowered his pistol. We have to get out of here, yelled Richard. Jake, can you walk? Yeah, it isn't that bad. I think I can make it, the agent said, standing. I was actually going to wonder about this because he's been shot in the leg and has just been kind of carrying on like a trooper. I guess that FBI training is some sick stuff. All right, coming back to the beginning of the paragraph. Yeah, it isn't too bad. I think I can make it, the agent said, standing. He looked around. Where's Michael, he asked. Jessica approached the motionless form of their friend. Michael, she asked, her voice shaking. She grabbed him and turned him over. She cried out and stepped back. From the clothes emerged the form of a red fox. It shied away as she tried to approach it. Jessica, we have to go, yelled Jake. There's nothing we can do for him. We're not leaving him, yelled Richard, joining his sister. He took the suppression collar that he had once worn and held it open, hoping to be able to place it on his friend. They backed the fox into a corner as quickly as they could. It snarled at them, becoming defensive as they closed on it. Some of the my insistent ways of using words is getting to me here, and I know I do this still as I write right now. In a flash of red, let me actually start back here a little bit earlier. They backed the fox into a corner as quickly as they could. It snarled at them, becoming defensive as they closed in. In a flash of red, it jumped on Richard. Struggling for a moment with the furious animal, Richard managed to close the suppression collar on its neck. He then stood with the now passive fox held in his arms. All right, let's go, he called. Richard and Jessica ran out the open door. It was a minute later that they realized that Jake wasn't with them. We don't have time now. We have to hope you went ahead, said Richard. Yeah, I wasn't really sure about what that last sentence meant, like where Jake was, but apparently he's not in the room at all. We don't have time now. We have to hope you went ahead, said Richard. As they continued running, they heard an echoing warning. 3 minutes until self-destruct. They picked up the pace, looking frantically for a way out. Finally, they ran across a couple of fleeing guards. They followed them and soon saw a door. 1 minute, the voice echoed again. They exited the door with less than a minute to get away from the blast and continued running. 10. They were tiring, but they hadn't yet gotten a comfortable distance between them and the facility. 5. We're not going to make it, cried Jessica. Yes, we are, responded Richard. 4, 3, 2, 1. Brace yourselves, yelled one of the guards. They were deafened by the tremendous explosion behind them. They fell forward onto the ground, thrown by the force of the blast. Jessica covered her head with her arms as she rolled to a stop, covering her ears for the loudness of the explosion. Richard, on the other hand, struck his head on a rock and fell senseless, a full 10 feet from where he had stood before the blast. But hey, they're still cool because they didn't look at the explosion. Let's see if it explains where, I say it like it's not me writing. Let's see if we explain let's try it again. Let's see if I explain where Michael was in this whole thing. Richard groaned. His whole body ached, and his head felt like it was going to break. He heard vague voices talking around him. Looks like the patient's coming around, said one. Richard groaned again, then lifted his hand to his head. He opened his eyes and blinked a few times to clear his vision. How do you feel, Rich? Came another. He looked over. Jessica? He asked, squinting at the figure that stood beside him. She laughed. Yes, Richard, it's me. Good to see you moving again. Richard rubbed his eyes for a moment, then looked around again. What happened? I feel like my head is going to go supernova, he said with a groan. You took a bit more damage than I did during the explosion. It seemed that the shock wave, should be one word, seems that the shock wave threw you headlong into a rock. This is a bit of feedback I was going to give to somebody else as well that I think it's like probably don't say the same thing twice really close to each other. So in this case, like right before the scene transition, he struck his head on a rock, and then right here, like 2 seconds after the scene transition, it looks like he struck a head on a rock. So yeah, probably find a better way to handle that. Yeah, that's what I thought. So it wasn't a dream. Finally, some clarity returned to his vision. He looked around and spotted the other person who sat beside him. So you made it out after all, Jake. Good to know. How's the leg? He added as he saw the leg of Jake's pants torn open to the injury and a makeshift bandage placed over him. Pretty good. Your sister was nice enough to relieve me of the bullet and bandage it up. She's like that, commented Richard, feeling the bandage on his head. Then he sat upright. Where's Michael? He asked, looking around. Calm down, Rich. He's right over there, said Jessica, pointing to the fox that stood a few feet away, tied to a tree. We're lucky that we took some rope. Jake stared at the fox. It's interesting, he said thoughtfully. Both of you were like zombies when we used the collar on you, but he acts rather energetic. It could just be the type of animal, Richard suggested. Speaking of that, we need to turn him back as soon as possible. Who knows what could happen if we leave him like that for too long? Richard tried to stand up. Probably a question mark. Hold on there, champ, Jake said, placing his hand on Richard's shoulder. You've been through a lot lately. Take a little time to recover. Not while there's still more to do. Where's the bag of antidotes that Michael was carrying? Here, said Jessica, picking up the crumpled pack from beside her. Then why haven't you given him the antidote yet? Richard asked. He suddenly saw the look of regret on his sister's face and began to fear what the answer might be. All of the bottles were shattered. I don't know how it happened. They were all broken when I took it. All it has in it now is Michael's equipment. Richard looked at the dirt. Richard? Jessica looked at the dirt. I think Michael may never be changed back. There has to be some way to turn him back. Jessica, where's the list of antidotes you told us about? I don't know, Jake said quietly. I had it in my pocket, but when I went to look at it again, it was gone. Can't you remember the formula? It was a complex chemical formula, Jake said, a little louder now. Then quietly he continued. I wish I could, but it is just too much to remember. I'm sorry. His shoulders slumped, obviously feeling responsible for his friend's situation. I could have done something. I knew Michael wasn't good at fighting. I should have helped him. No, Jake, it's not your fault, Richard said with a sigh. It wasn't any of us that caused this, or even let it happen. Michael went down while doing what he could to help us, not just us. He was fighting to save anyone else from being captured and put through what happened to us. We're using us several times here. Not necessarily like the death knell, something that needs to be fixed, but it does feel like I'm walking in circles, let's say. He didn't know that his efforts were in vain, but they have other facilities. He didn't know that his efforts were in vain, that they have other facilities. No, it wasn't in vain he did this. The loss of this facility will do much to hurt them. Of this there is no doubt, Jacob said. Let's hope that it's enough to save at least a couple of people from these madmen. He sat quietly for a few moments. Then Richard stood. Well, the fact remains that we need to find our way back to civilization if Michael is to have any chance of being returned to his own form. He walked to the fox and, after untying the rope, picked it up in his arms. Let's move out. No one made an argument and they started off. What I wouldn't give for a cell phone or a GPS right about now, Jake commented. Well, we'll have to make do? I'd probably say make do. We'll have to make do without one for the time being, but Jessica responded. Just keep walking. We're bound to run into civilization sooner or later. Little did they know just how right Jessica was on that point. It was less than an hour until they found a road. After walking along it for a while, they found out from an orientation sign on the side of the road that they were only about 5 miles from their hometown. Rather than try to explain why they had a fox with them, they decided to walk, and in a little over an hour they were back to where it all had started. Alright, that's chapter 7. And the next chapter is where we find out what Michael's secret is. But chapter 7 is where I apparently put most of the action here. And it's, I think, a decent bit of action, a decent bit of work for the most part. Main thing that stood out to me is something that I would very much prefer to change is, there's a couple of things, but the main one that really stuck out to me was that as the tremendous trio is making their move and they're saving Jake and everything there, Jake grabs a pistol and starts shooting at the ring of guards, and As far, I don't think I just said the exact number of guards in this scene at the time, but that seems like a really bad idea in a large room, such as the one that I described at the beginning of the scene. Because, like, you're wide open. If anybody else has a gun, then they've got a pretty easy shot at you. So, more, like, I mean, probably the best idea would be to try to have Jake try to take Manchester as a hostage. Um, uh, but that kind of messes with Michael getting stabbed. So I could possibly have this be a very quick turnaround sort of thing where Michael gets stabbed with the syringe, then Jake tackles Manchester um, and holds him at gunpoint. And then it's a little bit tricky. Like, how in the world do we get the self-destruct? I guess Manchester could hit a button. This is a very science fiction story, so I'm sure he has a self-destruct button somewhere on his person. So that really seems like something that's almost required. Now, how exactly they deal with Manchester from there is its own question. I mean, I could always do the classic trick of having them knock him out and leave him in the self-destructing base, and there's no way he could survive that. And then he shows up in the sequel. But it is interesting. I think I was kind of consciously trying to avoid that by having Manchester actually get shot here. Now, there's still, technically you can survive being shot. Less so being blown up, but, the idea behind there's no way he could survive that, and then he does, would be that there's probably a bunker somewhere. So if Manchester survives this whole situation, there's Hal, by the way. But this isn't a somehow Palpatine returned. Even 17 years ago, I was a better writer than that. But yeah, it's a good bit of action here again. There's some tweaks that I probably make here. The guards, I mean, yeah, they disperse, so it's when the self-destruct sequence gets started. So that's not a big deal. Self-destruct sequence is definitely a very tropey sort of thing. Not just like a fiction trope, but a video game trope, which tells you a lot of my media consumption tends to be, I think. But it kind of fits the tone of the story as well, at least in my opinion, because we're dealing around in this facility. As I mentioned, this is probably something that I'd have to adjust how exactly the facility works if I were to rewrite it, if I were to try to recover and actually use this plot more or less in the future. But it does have that kind of tone to it, where it's these kind of things with the self-destruct sequence and everything makes sense. Now, one thing that absolutely disappears midway through this scene are the test subjects who have been turned into animals. And, minimally, I needed to say something about them bolting and panicking and whatever. Because otherwise, they just blew up however many test subjects. And even with them bolting and leaving and whatever, you still got a whole bunch of people that are animals that you're going to have to deal with. Now, this is, 17 years ago me, so I could be wrong about my thought processes and things that I had in mind. But I get the feeling that it was in the plans to deal with that finding people who had been turned into animals and helping them get back ends up being a goal for the Tremendous Trio in the future. Which, fair enough. I think that's a good goal. But I still think that I needed to say something about that as we're coming out of the sequence where you have the self-destruct sequence and everything blowing up. But yeah, we're apparently, I hope we're through. The facility sure seems like it's a smoldering wreck at this point. So yeah, we spent not super. I mean, we spent most of the story in there, but again, it's not a very long story. Now that we've basically called wraps on the facility, once again, I would emphasize that I very much, if I were to write this story again, very much would have our protagonists spend some time with some other subjects. Sorry, my dog's shaking out her collar. But my protagonist should spend some time with some other test subjects, whether they're animals or whether they're not. And I think that can also help to sort of eliminate the kind of samey sections that we have of this story, where you're walking through halls, and then you're walking through halls, then you're turning a corner, then you're turning more corners, and nowhere along the way are you running into guards until very specific points. So, yeah, I would like to do that, adjust that. Also need to work on the facility. Again, the idea this is supposed to be a repurposed storage facility is something I can work with. I've been working in warehouses, so I actually have a little bit better idea how those might be laid out. Again, the scientists have more than just implied, but stated they have added on to this, and they have adjusted things. So things like the big laboratory room are things that could have been added. I would add, as I mentioned in the previous part, some kind of a courtyard or something. I still think that a lot of the testing on animals would likely be done outside, and you'd have a limited number of people inside. So that's another thing that could probably help me with trying to fix the issues that I have with the laboratory scene here. Because if you just have one or two other animals in the room at the time that you set off the self-destruct sequence, then they're pretty easy to herd out, and especially if they're wearing suppression collars, which I think any animal really would be wearing a suppression collar inside just to prevent them from doing anything stupid. Especially if they're wearing suppression collars, you can handle that. So yeah, some interesting things going on here. It's interesting. I'm interested to see what happens here with Chapter 8, figuring out what Michael's secret is. One would assume that he has some secret that's going to help him to be turned back. Otherwise, the tremendous trio may end up being Richard, Jessica, and Jake instead of Michael. I have my suspicions that that's probably not the case. No spoilers or anything. But I'll mention probably as I do the epilogue. I'm probably going to read the epilogue and then just give my overall story thoughts. But there are a few things about Michael in particular that I plan to bring up when we get to those chapters, when we get to the epilogue and the end of this book. But for now, I just looked up and saw this again, but I do like the fact that there's a dichotomy here between a cell phone and a GPS, because it's 17 years ago, and phone GPSs are at best unreliable. Oh man, yeah, the phones I had at this point in history were, you couldn't even buy them nowadays. But yeah, I hope you all enjoyed this, and a little bit more action in this scene. Anyway, if anyone is still hanging around, then I'll see you guys next time, and we'll be finishing up the story here pretty quickly. Let me see here. I think, based off the length, I don't think we've got... Yeah, we just got Michael's Secret in the epilogue, so I will probably just record both of those on the same day at the same time, and just split the video in half and just do my post-mortem in the epilogue. But yeah, it's been fun so far, and yeah, I am really looking forward to doing this with the other book. I'm also considering possibly doing this with some friends writing. I want to be a little bit more careful with those, because I'm being very carefree and very loose and kind of sardonic about my criticisms of the writing, because it's me. I wrote this, so if I say something that somebody could find hurtful, I am hurting me, so I really don't care. Yeah, I mean, it's interesting to go through something like this and kind of talk through it. And this is kind of the way that I like to do the editing on my novel. So I am working on my second novel now, a little bit more seriously. I've had some good progress with outlining. It was interesting. It's actually been a few years since I started writing this book. And I started writing it, made a lot of good progress, and just kind of hit a hitch. And it wasn't a hitch about not necessarily knowing where the plot was going, but more just how to connect different scenes. And as I've been outlining, as I've been workshopping, it's been starting to flow a little better to where I think I may be missing 2 or 3 scenes, or possibly just need to figure out how to expand some scenes to accomplish some of the purposes that I have in those. That book, like I've been calling it a novel, but it's probably going to be more novella length. I'm hopefully going to see if I can try to get that published, so if all goes well here, get that process running sometime here in the current year. So I'll be sure to let everybody know what happens there. But for now, I'll say goodbye to everybody, and once again, thanks for watching.